Good day and welcome to today's International Space Station Update News Conference. With us today is Michael Suffredini, the International Space Station Program Manager. He'll bring us up to date on the latest information we have on the status of the Progress 44 spacecraft, the launch date from Baikonur Cosmodrome, and then we'll take your questions. Mike?
Good morning. At 8 a.m., approximately 8 a.m. this morning Central Time, the Progress 44P was launched successfully from the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Unfortunately, about 325 seconds into flight, shortly after the third stage was ignited, the vehicle itself commanded an engine shutdown due to an engine anomaly. Given the trajectory and the energy in the spacecraft at the time, the vehicle impacted in the Altai region of the Russian Federation. And that, unfortunately, is about what we know today, because the telemetry was lost shortly thereafter, and up to that point, at least the preliminary data indicates the vehicle was flying according to the plan. Obviously, this has implications to the vehicle on orbit and the crew as well. Our Russian colleagues will begin the process of forming a commission, which I'm sure they've already done, and will immediately begin to assess the data that's available to try to determine root cause. The spacecraft booster is called a Soyuz-U for the Progress. The booster for the Soyuz vehicle that carries crews to orbit is called the Soyuz FG. The third stage on both of those vehicles is similar, and so this has potential implications to the Soyuz launch on the 22nd of September. So as a program, we've immediately begun the process of assessing the impacts and potential implications to the vehicle on board and the crew on board. From a logistics standpoint, this flight was carrying largely resupply items in terms of consumables. There were very few one-of-a-kind items. In fact, none that I'm aware of are one-of-a-kind ORUs, orbital replacement units, if you will. But there was quite a bit of logistics on board, and most of which falls in the heading of consumables and crew supplies. But in addition to that, the 2.9 metric tons that was on the Progress, about almost 1.3 metric tons was dry cargo, the supplies I referred to earlier, and the remainder was water, fuel, and gas. So given the logistics situation on board ISS, particularly with having flown ULF-7, and because we're at a higher altitude now and lower drag, we're in a good position logistically to withstand this loss of supplies that are going to come to ISS. And in fact, I would tell you we can go several months without a resupply vehicle if that becomes necessary. Now, the other implication, as I mentioned, of course, is the crew on board and when the Soyuz would be ready to launch. So while our Russian colleagues sort that out, as the team starts getting together, and in fact at 1 o'clock today, the IMMT will convene to discuss the potential implications on the crew rotation cycle. I can tell you this particular crew is, their nominal return on the 8th of September resulted in a 162-day period on orbit. We nominally plan for 180 days, and in fact we have about a 30-day contingency on that. So we have at least 40 to 50 days of contingency for the crew to stay on orbit that much longer to allow us to stay at a 6-crew period while they sort out the anomaly. Of course, if things extend too long, which we don't have any indication today that's the case, but given the anomaly, we have to be prepared. There is an ability, of course, to operate station with less than 6 crew if that becomes necessary. At some point, the vehicle on orbit that has Ron and Andre and Sasha is intended to bring them home will time out, and so we will have to bring them home. But operating at a 3-crew size is something that we're familiar with and able to do, although it would have implications on our ability to perform research. So that's where we are today. We wanted to get this in front of you as quick as we could to let you know. As you start to ask questions today, if you ask me a bunch of technical questions about the progress, I'll tell you I don't know, and I'll ask you to refer those questions to our Russian colleagues. I'll also tell you they are very, very busy trying to retrieve all the available data to try to begin their assessments to sort this out. They do have resources to fly another Progress. The 45 Progress was due to launch in late October. That vehicle could fly sooner if they've solved the anomaly and decide that that's the better part of Valor. But all that is forward work for us. But I would tell you they're very, very busy sorting through this anomaly. Meanwhile, we're in a perfectly good configuration on orbit. We'll operate nominally for some time. Even if the Soyuz gets delayed somewhat, we'll just operate nominally on board ISS and wait for our Russian colleagues to sort out this anomaly and get ready for the next launch. And so with that, I'll take your questions.
Okay, and please remember to state your name and affiliation. We'll start here in Houston with Gina.
Gina Sinceri, ABC News for Mike. Mike, have you seen this kind of problem on a Progress before, or is this the first time this kind of issue has happened?
Not in my history with the ISS program have I seen this. So we haven't had a Progress anomaly associated with the ISS since the beginning of the program.
And the second question, what is your time? Give me the dates that you would have to make decisions in terms of crewing and Soyuz launch. Can you sort of lay that timeline out for me?
Well, they do turn out to be separate. As I tried to say earlier, our nominal crew rotation period is 180 days, and we have 30 days of margin on that. And that is supported by crew health and the vehicle, the Soyuz vehicle itself. So we'll look very hard at that number. We'll look specifically at the crew on orbit that might be extended beyond that period, and I know our Russian colleagues will look at the data on this particular Soyuz to see if that can be extended. And then we will decide to bring the crew home whenever it's the right time to bring the crew home, either because of the Soyuz or because of the crew, but we will bring them home when it's right to do so. So the next question becomes, when is the next Soyuz fly? And that's why I said it's kind of independent. If the next Soyuz launches in the next 40 or so days, then, or if I'll say it differently, if the delay is 40 or 50 days of the launch, then what we'll do is we'll have our normal gap, because we'll keep the crew on orbit longer, at least today. That's our assumption. If all the data points to that, we'll keep the crew on orbit, stay at 6 crew, then we'll return the crew 2 weeks before launch of the next vehicle, and we'll have the normal 2-week gap on board ISS. If the launch gets delayed beyond that period, at some point we'll just bring the crew home, because that's the right thing to do, and we'll operate ISS at 3 crew until the Soyuz are ready to fly the next crew up. And we're perfectly able to operate at 3 crew. We just won't get much research done during that period. But they're sort of independent.
And you've got plenty of consumables on board the space station, so consumables aren't the limiting factor on 6-person. Could you sort of just shorten for me what is the limiting factor on 6 people on station?
Oh, I'd have to look at the data. We can go so far, I've forgotten what the specific limiting factor is. Food is very, very long. Water is incredibly long with the processors we have. Interestingly enough, it's probably the logistically speaking, it's probably potty parts. We have inserts and consumables that get changed out regularly as the crew uses the potty. However, we also have a very large supply of potty parts as well. But I would guess that if I was counting on which consumable would drive us, it might be potty parts in the end. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
But again, let me stress, that's way in the future. We won't be talking about that for some time.
Sorry, Mike. We'll move on to our phone bridge, and we have been having some technical issues with that, so I'll call them in the order that I received them initially. and we'll try to make sure everybody gets a chance to ask their questions. We'll start with Bill Harwood at CBS.
Yeah, hey, Mike. I was reflecting on this launch this morning and was thinking, like everybody had after the last shuttle flight, was that it really shows the loss of redundancy can have an impact. Can you just talk about that philosophically? I mean, I realize the Russians will track this down, but it does kind of highlight what can happen when you lose at least any leg of redundancy in the supply train. Thanks.
Yeah, but philosophically, we have discussed this from the very beginning. Our desire was to try to have the U.S. I'll call them the U.S. commercial cargo vehicles available as soon as we could post the last shuttle flight. It's one of the reasons why we added ULF-7 to give us the margin, to give us some time till those vehicles flew. So clearly, if we had another vehicle in our list of systems to fly to ISS, that would give us margin that we would obviously make use of. The shuttle vehicle, of course, could fly crews. It could fly quite a bit of cargo, and so that would be a capability we miss. But I'll be perfectly honest with you. Right now, even if you had a shuttle, I wouldn't be standing it up to try to hurry up and go fly. Logistically, we're in really good shape. We need the Soyuz vehicle for rescue anyway. So I think we would be focusing our attention now on the anomaly on the Soyuz and trying to get ourselves in a posture to get it flying again. But it clearly, and we've always talked about this, it'd be nice to have the capability. However, at some point you got to decide what's enough to get the job done, so you can point your resources to the next thing the agency wanted to do. So we've always known this was a risk, and I very much expect that we'll, together with our Russian colleagues, sort out the anomaly and get comfortable with the next flight and continue to support ISS and utilize ISS the way we said we would.
Your Russian colleagues, that the thing is on the ground, or is that just news reports? I'm just making sure what we know for fact. Thanks.
I believe they've told us in more than one instance that it did land in the Altai region. Excuse me. I'm not aware that anybody has a visual on that. They didn't tell us that, so I'm not exactly sure why they know that. But that was reported to us from several sources on the Russian side.
Okay, Bill, not hearing any more from you. I'm going to move on to Philip Sloss.
This is Philip Sloss with NASASpaceflight.com. I have a couple questions. First, looking a little bit down the road, what is the long-term schedule for the next automated transfer vehicle, ATV-3, and then the H-2 transfer vehicle next year?
Let's see. The ATV launches at the very end of February of next year. Wait, hang on just a second. I have that right here in front of me. I don't know why I'm trying to do it by memory. ATV-3 launch is right now on March the 5th, and it would dock on the 19th. HTV-3 was going to launch in February, and we're looking at moving that to the May timeframe. Again, logistically speaking, we're in really good shape, and so I don't think we have any issue waiting until if we got into that situation. And I doubt very seriously we'd be in that situation, but if we had to wait all the way till ATV-3 was ready to go fly, I don't have any concern that we couldn't support the crew to that period.
Okay, thanks. And then more short term, I believe this Progress vehicle, the 44P, was going to be doing a couple of reboosts. Has there been any assessment about either doing the reboosts from a phasing standpoint for the TMA-22 launch, or also obviously for altitude maintenance? Is there any possibility of using the service module, for instance, for that, or the other Progress?
I don't remember the specifics on how we were going to do the phasing, but I can tell you that the the service module has the engines to do the work. We try not to use it because we just want to limit the life, the using up the life on those engines that obviously can't be replaced. So we have dam capability, which would be your near-term question. Can we do a debris avoidance maneuver? We can do phasing burns. We can even actually use the nadir progress to do phasing burns if we need to. And so from a phasing standpoint, we're okay. From a reboost standpoint, we'll probably talk about whether we want to do the reboost without the progress or not. Of course, we have quite a bit of prop on board ISS right now, so our tanks are pretty full. The progress itself was bringing up prop itself. I've forgotten how much, but it was on the order of a metric ton. That we could have used for the reboost as well. So we'll have a conversation about drag profiles and when the possible launch would be of the next progress and the prop that we have on board, and we'll make a decision on whether it makes sense to do the reboost that we had planned to do with 44 progress now or wait till 45P. That's work in front of us. I can tell you we have the prop. We could do the reboost if we chose to, but we'll talk about that amongst ourselves before we make a decision. But in any event, the bottom line is the service module engines can do anything that the Progress engines could have done for us. So the phasing burns, any debris avoidance maneuver, even reboost, we can do if we need to and choose to.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, we'll move now to Marcia Dunn.
Yes, hi, can you hear me?
Yes,
Sure.
we can hear you fine.
Yes, Mike, if things are just stable on the station like they are now, how long could you go without any resupply?
I don't. There's things we can do to extend how long we operate on orbit. We can reduce nominal food consumption. There's a number of things we could do if we needed to extend. I would tell you, as I said earlier, we haven't done that math yet because we have to consider both the Russian and the U.S. segment, and HTV and ATV were supplies we had planned for anyway. But I don't have any concern about getting to if nothing flew before the ATV flight. I believe as a program we could continue to operate on board. Now you have to understand, at some point here in the late October timeframe, we'd have to decide to go down to 3 crew, and of course now your consumable consumption goes down at that point. So we wouldn't be doing as much research, but you don't spend as much in consumables as well. So if we go into an extended period without consumables, that tells me I've gone an extended period without crew rotation, and that just means you can go longer with the 3 crew on board ISS. So I can tell you today I can get all the way to the March launch of ATV. I feel pretty comfortable telling you that today, but I haven't looked to see what we'd have to do to get beyond that.
Thank you. And another question, I know that this is just a what-if question, but NASA likes what if, and if how long could the station remain safely in orbit without any crew? Is there a finite period for that if ground controllers were in charge of everything?
Assuming no failures, we always protect prop to keep us in orbit about a year. Now we're not at that point in our altitude, so our altitude today is higher than that, but we manage our altitude and our prop to always have enough prop to keep us in orbit at least a year. So today, if we stop supplying ISS altogether today, and we didn't have multiple system failures, which is why we prefer to, in these instances, stay manned. If we did nothing else, we have at least a year, and I'm sure in this case, because of where we are on our prop tanks, we're probably longer than that in orbit. So we've got quite a bit of time.
All right, so I'm just wanting to make sure I understand. If there were no astronauts of any sort on board, you could go at least a year, assuming no failures on important equipment. Right,
but the question I was answering for you that I thought you were asking if I had no resupply spacecraft either.
You had no astronauts on board. If there,
Oh, no.
if for whatever reason, and I know this is all what if.
Right.
If you had to abandon the station, how long could it safely stay in orbit, assuming no equipment failures?
Indefinitely.
Okay.
All the prop vehicles are automated vehicles. We can dock and undock and resupply prop and reboost and keep the system stable and doing what it needs to do to be happy indefinitely, as long as the system, we don't end up with system failures that keep us from commanding the spacecraft.
Okay, so the space station is safe in orbit even without any crew, assuming
Correct.
no major malfunctions.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next on the list is Mark Carreau from Aviation Week.
Thanks, Mark Carreau, Aviation Week, and I have a couple of questions. Can you be any more specific about the commonality between the third stage of the Progress and the Soyuz crew vehicles, and to what level of participation would you want NASA to have in a failure investigation of this sort?
I can't tell you, Mark, specifically. Our Russian colleagues, and we've known this for some time, that there were very strong similarities between a FGB-U and a Soyuz-U and a Soyuz FG, I'm sorry. And we were told today that when you get to the third stage, they're particularly similar. But I couldn't tell you what that means right now, and I'm sure that'll be part of what comes out as part of our discussion and investigation. The last major anomaly that we worked with our Russian colleagues was, as you might recall, it had to do with the separation system for reentry, and we were on the commission and participated closely on that. So I'd expect something similar, certainly in this anomaly, because of the implications to the Soyuz booster. But we have not discussed that. We're trying very hard to give our Russian colleagues time to collect the data. It's a challenging process right after an anomaly, because everybody wants answers, and really what you need is time to collect the data and sort it out and find out what the important parameters are, and make sure you hadn't missed some parameters you might have thought wasn't that important. Of course, if the vehicle did impact the ground as in any condition to be recovered, I'm sure they'll want to go try to take a look at it as well. So there's quite a bit of data to gather before you can even make certain kinds of assumptions, and so we're trying to give our Russian colleagues a little time to look at the preliminary data and gather themselves together and decide what their plan forward is going to be. But we will have those discussions here in the semi-near future about our participation with them in the investigation.
Thanks. And I had a follow-up question. Could you sort of review for us the current planning for the SpaceX mission, and whether this particular event in any way sort of ups the ante? I guess I've also forgotten whether there'll be supplies on board, and whether that picks up any slack, or this is strictly part of the demo leading up to operational flights of SpaceX and the Orbital Sciences vehicle next year.
Well, let's see. Currently, the SpaceX demo was at the end of this year. We have agreements to carry up to 800 kilos, but given the successful shuttle launch, if they were to fly by the end of this year, I'm not sure we would have too much to put on that flight. And as you said, it's a demo flight, and so it's, from a logistics standpoint, it's not critical. It shouldn't be critical to us. The way we had done our logistics with the shuttle flight, we had put ourselves in a position to get to the end of the calendar year 2012, assuming we did have the ATV and the HTV. And in fact, the ATV wasn't even full in that scenario. So it's without more data, without a more detailed assessment, it's hard for me to tell you now, if I didn't have the Progress vehicle supporting the Russian segment, whether or not, how long we could go and what the impacts are. That's really forward work for us. So we haven't really had time to kind of sort the specifics out for you. I can tell you from a U.S. perspective, we could go this whole 2012 year without logistics from these vehicles. That's not what you want to do. I want the demo flights to fly. I'd like to see at least one of their commercial flights to ISS fly, just to make sure the system is going to be there for you in the 2013 timeframe when we need it. But logistically, we didn't require it. That was one of the main reasons why we flew STS-135. I haven't done the assessment to tell you if now we're supplying supplies to the Russian segment as well as the U.S. segment, what the implications would be. I answered earlier that I thought we could get to the ATV launch without a logistics vehicle, and that's based on what I know of the logistics train and what our Russian colleagues have on orbit, but that's not even a precise assessment. So it'd be hard for me to really answer your question in any detail.
Okay, thanks, Mark. We go on to Ken Chang. And we're not hearing you, Ken, if you'd like to try again. All right, move down the list to Jim Oberg.
Good morning. Good morning, Mike. The question I have, Mike, would you give us a little background on your standard skip cycle planning and whether or not this kind of event fits into the contingencies you already have planned for?
Yeah, you know, Jim, we used to talk about, you probably remember, we used to talk about a 45-day skip cycle, and that was 45 days after the next logistics vehicle was expected to be at ISS. However, with ULF-7, we kind of overachieved, and so we're way beyond worrying about skip cycle right now. Other than, of course, and this really doesn't apply to skip cycle, when we need to bring the crew that was intended to come home on September 8th, when do we need to bring them home? We do need to sort that out. And as I said, we can operate at 3 crew. But that skip cycle thing and we will worry about again someday when when we consume some of the supplies we have on orbit down a bit. That skip cycle was 45 days, but we well exceed that because of the pre-positioning we did with ULF-7.
Okay, well, thank you. I understand, by the way, that the Altai crash was not a visual, but a sound detection. People heard it it broke out windows apparently for 100 kilometers all around.
I hadn't heard that, but
that's
not surprising.
Okay, that's all from you, Jim. Then we'll go to Dan Leone.
Yeah, hi, Mike. Pardon me for asking a dumb question here. I'm sure I could deduce this from the things you have already said, but the 3 tons of cargo and the supplies and things that were going up, is it necessary that at some point another supply mission flies and brings the same stuff up there that didn't make it this time? Or if you decide to go down the skeleton crew, will that effectively compensate and eliminate the need to have some other cargo flight? It would be helpful for me to have clarity on that, so thanks.
Well, clearly, if we go down to 3 crew, I would suspect that catching up later is going to be easier to do, depending on how long we're without vehicles, of course. If we stay at 6 crew, then there will have to be a makeup at some point. And now I'm speculating, because the U.S. segment's largely not affected too much by this. There was, on this particular progress of almost 1.3 metric tons, we had about 365 kilograms for U.S. supply. And so in the big scheme of things, that's not a large number. We will eventually need to make up that resupply, but I would tell you we have time. So when we start flying progresses again, and if we start flying progresses in the next couple of months, then I would tell you that we'll fly the most important supplies first, and then over a course of probably half a dozen flights in a year and a half, we'll catch back up. That's just speculation on my part, but the point is we have the margin, and so if we do delay, eventually we would want to replace those supplies, and it'll depend on when the U.S. commercial vehicles become available and when the progresses are ready to start flying again and what rate the progresses will fly at, and that'll then all determine what we put on what vehicles and how we keep the supply train going. But again, I at least today would expect that they'll be able to fly the next progress here certainly in a few months, and for a few months of waiting, that's certainly within the bounds of normal manifesting, to put the things that are going to become most critical to us first, and then over time get ourselves back to the point where we were, or decide if the commercial guys start flying and we don't need to have that much supplies on orbit, maybe we'll decide to defer that to later. But that's just part of what we have to sort through.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, and next on the list is Tarek Malik.
Thank you, Mike. It's Tarek Malik with Space.com. And I just wanted to make sure I understand the decision-making process on the crew side going towards September's launch. And then you mentioned earlier the kind of the October time frame for deciding if you have to go down to 3 crew or not. Can you kind of, I guess, walk through the steps you anticipate you'd have to go through then about when the September crew would have to stand down from that launch, and you would decide to go to a three-man crew if that becomes necessary in October. If you just give a picture of how that would work, that would be great to understand.
Well, so we're going to kind of work in parallel right now. Our Russian colleagues are going to work very hard to determine the cause of the anomaly. The ops team, is going to work very hard to look at all of our options, including what's the longest the crew can stand to medically, do we feel safe keeping the crew on orbit, and what is the absolute maximum time this particular Soyuz could stay on orbit. So I would tell you it's not one or the other. We'll work those together, and then we will see where the anomaly resolution process takes us. And there's a lot of places it could take you. That's the possibility we might decide that we've figured out the anomaly relatively quick, but we want to fly a progress before we fly the Soyuz. There's all kinds of possible scenarios associated with that. So it's kind of a parallel process. We'll see how long we can possibly go. I'd like to keep 6 crew on orbit as long as I can to continue doing the things that we do on ISS, all the research. We have quite a bit of research on ISS. In fact, it turns out there's very little research, I think 10 kilograms on this particular progress, so we didn't really impact research hardly at all with this loss. So we have quite a bit of research on board. I'd like to keep the crew on board doing the research. There's no reason why we can't do that. So it'll be this parallel process of the commission sorting out what the anomaly is, deciding what the resolution is, deciding what launches they want to do when and when the dates are. And meanwhile, we'll try to figure out what's the longest time we can keep this crew on orbit, and then at some point we'll make that decision. If we still don't know what we're doing relative to recovering from the launch, and I suspect we'll at least have plans, but if we're not sure and don't know when the crew's going to fly, then some point as we get into October, we'll have to start planning for a return of the crew and start that process sort of independent of the anomaly resolution when the next flight's going to actually take place. So I hope that helps. Today the anomaly just occurred a few hours ago. So there's quite a bit of work to do to sort through, where we're at, and we need to give the teams time to work it. We haven't really had the first mission management team meeting to discuss this, but it's going to be kind of a parallel path for a little while. And if things work out and it looks like the Soyuz will be able to fly early enough, then we'll let the crew stay on orbit till we do what I'll call a normal rotation, just late but normal rotation, where one set of crew comes home about 2 weeks before the next crew is launched. But if we can't support that, that's fine too. We'll just begin the process and plan for a re-entry day, which is of course well coordinated with our Russian colleagues. They have 2 of the 3 crew on this particular Soyuz, and we always fly mixed crew anyway, so it's a joint effort. But they have to decide, they have to stand up the search and rescue teams and all the things they have to do for a normal Soyuz return. So we'll make that decision somewhere down the road as the commission starts working on its findings and deciding, what's the repair, how long does that take, then what's the launch sequence, and when finally ultimately will the next crew be able to come to ISS. So it's going to be a parallel process here for a little while as we sort through the details of our options.
Thank you. And I think a really short follow-up, looking ahead to what would have been a nominal schedule for the crew. I just wanted to clarify that you would have anticipated something like, I guess, 4 more flights, including both Soyuz and Progress in that regular schedule, or was it 3? I guess just to clear that up, that'd be helpful. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't understand the question, Tarek. Say it again.
In terms of numbers of launches you were anticipating prior to the anomaly, the incident today, I'm just wondering if that was 2 Soyuz flights and 2 Progress, or was it just 3, a couple of crew and 1 more Progress this year? Thanks.
Let's see, with a Progress in October and again, I got it right here, I just have to look. There was actually a Progress currently slated for the 27th of December as well. So we had 2 Progresses and 2 Soyuzes between now and the end of the calendar year.
Thank you.
Okay. Next is Irene Klotz from Reuters.
Hi, thanks very much for doing this, Mike. I was just wondering if there's any similarity at all between the upper stage of this Progress and the launch accident that Russia had last week with their Breeze M upper stage.
As far as I know, they are completely different vehicles. But I'd also be the first to tell you I'm not an expert in Russian launch vehicles, so I would defer the specifics to that answer to our Russian colleagues when you get a chance to talk with them.
Thanks. And also, would you mind just, I was very surprised when I heard about this, and I was just wondering what the reaction was when, how you found out about it, just what the, if it kind of jarred you a little bit, or just what the response was when you first heard. Thanks.
Well, it's, you always know there's a lot of things that can happen with space station, and on launch day you do, we always are very sensitive to launches, and so we wait for them to occur, and then we wait for the email telling us that we have the standard process where we keep everybody informed, and so I'm a part of that process. Sometimes I go into the control center for the launches, and sometimes I don't. This morning I did not go in, but I was in my office. I got the email talking about the launch, but I didn't get the email that said about 8 minutes later that said that the appendages all been deployed, which is usually like clockwork. And so after the launch email, and I was waiting for the launch, and I didn't, in about 8 minutes I didn't see anything, in about 10 minutes I didn't see anything. And so about that time, phones started ringing and emails started pouring in, and so that's where I learned that we had lost contact with the vehicle. We didn't know what that meant at that time. We thought there was a possible chance that that we just lost comm, and the spacecraft being automated would have just taken itself to orbit and deployed its appendages. And so we asked a lot of folks, our Russian colleagues. We also, our StratCom guys tracked that for us. And all of them a little while later reported that somewhere within about, I'd say 20 minutes of launch time, 20 to 25 minutes, I finally got a call that said that they thought that it commanded itself to shut down and it didn't have energy to get to orbit. And roughly about that time, our tracking guys told us they had expected to see it and did not. And so we assumed that it didn't make it to orbit. It's one of those things that kind of sneaks up on you a little bit. You begin worrying the next thing, and of course I know that the Progress and Soyuz both use the same booster, and so immediately I started worrying about how quickly we're going to be able to sort this out and what we're going to do with our crew on orbit. But you don't, in this business, you've long since learned that you just need to let the process take hold and sort it out. Things are never as bad or as good as they're first reported, and so if you stick with that philosophy, you tend to stay fairly, I'll say, kind of level throughout it. So I didn't go through any big swings one way or the other. I was disappointed that we'd lost the spacecraft, but frankly, I think we'll sort this one out and we'll get to flying again, and we'll learn from it and move on.
Thanks, Mike.
Okay. Next is Alex Hirsch, NHK. All right, not hearing Alex, we'll move on to Mark Matthews with the Orlando Sentinel.
Thanks, guys. Thank you, Mike. Just a quick question. Given the constraints on the health of the crew, and forgetting for a moment resupplies, because it sounds like that is not going to be a particular problem, but given the constraints on the health of the crew, at what point do you have to abandon station if there's no resupply of crew?
You know, that varies with the crew. We worry about a number of things. You know, just in and of itself, time on orbit, I would tell you we worried a lot more before, but with the exercise equipment we have today, I think physically speaking, we have a little margin in the 180 days. Well, I'll start with, we use 180 days plus 30 days margin, so that's what we plan our crew on orbit time. If we have a crew that has a low radiation dose, has no other medical implications, we could probably extend that a little bit and be comfortable with that. So I don't know the answer to that for any of the crew that are on orbit today. That's data we don't share openly, and we'll ask the right folks to go sort that out with the three crew that would be coming home, Ron and Andre and Sasha. We'll look to them first to see what we think we could, how long they could stay on orbit. But I suspect that in most cases, the Soyuz will drive when the crew returns. I think our crews will always be able to extend longer than we'll be comfortable leaving the Soyuz vehicle on orbit, assuming no mods of the Soyuz that gets it significantly extended life today as I know it. So that's what I would expect. I expect at some point we'll say, you know, really we need to bring the Soyuz home. That's the right thing to do. And I would expect that the crew, from a crew health standpoint, that the crew won't be the driving factor. But that is something we have to look at. That's what the team is off looking at. What I told you was my supposition, and if we find something different, we'll react accordingly.
And then I guess 210 days from the arrival of the most fresh crew would then put us somewhere in the, I guess, January or February time frame of 2012. Is that accurate?
Yeah, I'd have to do that off time. It'd be February, March time frame, yeah.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Okay, next is Agence France Presse. Okay, we're not getting a response there, so I know we've been having some technical issues with the phone bridge lines, so I'll go back through the folks that we tried and missed first. Ken Chang, are you on the New York Times? All right, and then Alex Hirsch from NHK, one more chance. All right, we'll check any additional questions here in Houston. Okay, we want to thank you all for being here, and especially Mr. Suffredini for showing up on such short notice to give us this update. With that, we'll conclude our briefing. Thank you very much for coming.